If we could first reflect on the legacy of Senator Graham, who had very close relationships with President Trump, yes, but with Netanyahu and Zelensky as well, acted in many ways as a liaison between those countries and the White House. Is there anyone who can take up that mantle now?
Well, Kailey, that's a really good question. I don't see an immediate successor because Senator Graham was really a unique individual. He had this charming, funny way about him, and he was really consistent when it came to his support for frontline democracies like Ukraine, Taiwan, other countries. And he did have a way of convincing President Trump to not completely flip sides and go over to the Russian side and to listen to his arguments when it came to support for Ukraine. So he will be missed. I think his colleagues are obviously doing the best thing they can do to pay tribute to the late senator, which is to pass the sanctions legislation that you mentioned earlier.
Well, it is a remarkable confluence of events here. If life is all about timing, this is the day, Evelyn, to have all of these people in one room memorializing Lindsey Graham, helping to potentially inflate the vote count for this sanctions package. We know it's going to pass. Unlikely we'll receive the unanimous consent agreement that some were hoping for. But what might this mean for the trajectory of the actual war in Ukraine?
Well, Joe, it means that there's an opportunity now for President Trump to really put more economic pressure on Russia. We've seen, of course, Ukraine putting increasing military pressure on Russia through the long-range drone strikes that they've conducted, hitting oil refineries, hitting supply logistics chains to Crimea, for example. But this now means that we can pressure the Russians where it really hurts and where they're very vulnerable, which is cash flow. They need money to supply their weaponry to pay people. They actually have a real labor problem and they have a war economy. So cutting off the flow of oil revenue to Russia will make an impact. And the way that these sanctions are devised, the president will have to impose them. He'll also have to report to Congress. There was a lot of strengthening that was done behind the scenes while Lindsey Graham was alive and then even afterwards.
Well, you mentioned the president would have to impose them. Sanctions are only effective if enforced, Evelyn. You have confidence these would be?
Well, Kailey, I do think they will be better enforced than they have been in the past, and it won't be entirely up to the United States. So we will see the Europeans taking advantage of this as well. There are some loopholes for the Europeans because, of course, they still get some oil from Russia and gas, but the amounts are lower. They're below the threshold, so they won't be hit by the sanctions, but they'll be motivated to take action to demonstrate, because in line with this legislation, they have to demonstrate that they are trying to reduce their dependence on Russia. So overall, it's good news, and it does provide President Trump with an opportunity, something that he can use as he pushes for diplomacy.
Evelyn, it's not lost on us what good friends John McCain and Lindsey Graham were. Of course, Joe Lieberman was the third musketeer, if you want to complete the picture here. But I'm quite sure that John McCain would have some pretty strong feelings about seeing this legislation now formally named the Lindsey O. Graham Sanctioning Russia Act. What would he have thought?
I think he would be very proud of his friend. You know, he didn't always agree with him. Obviously, the late Senator McCain never supported President Trump, and President Trump insulted the late senator. Nevertheless, he would very much approve of and, be supportive of the fact that Senator Graham maintained his adherence to the principles of sovereignty, the human rights, the need to defend Ukraine. And so I know that Senator McCain obviously would be wholeheartedly in support of this. He would probably say something like, it's about time, this is long overdue, because he was a kind of guy to be pushing forward for more. And I'm sure he would have wanted more.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this bill does include more than was initially drafted. It has expanded, Evelyn, to encompass potential sanctions pertaining to Iran as well. And as we consider the state of play with Iran, we obviously have seen no shots fired, no strikes that the U.S. has conducted since Friday. It seems that there is the pursuit of peace once again through diplomatic negotiations. Would you put much faith in the process this time around after they've been unsuccessful in previous rounds?
Well, Kailey, I think we're going to have to be patient here, and it's not going to be just diplomacy. I think the United States, our allies and partners, we're going to have to put economic pressure, frankly, on Iran. The military instrument alone clearly isn't working. If we can put economic pressure on Iran by squeezing off their ability to trade, by harming their economy, eventually they will have to come to the negotiating table. And they think that they can outweigh President Trump. I think that our goal should be really to outweigh them. So keep on pushing forward with diplomacy, with economic pressure, with maybe limited strikes if they're necessary. But I think at this point, our military, has spoken to President Trump, according to media reports, and they've said that the military effort isn't succeeding. And in fact, it's, of course, costing us a lot of money and depleting our reserves.
Zelensky was not the only meeting, the only world leader the president met with today, Evelyn. Benjamin Netanyahu was also at the White House. And while reporters were not invited in the room for either meeting, we did hear from a spokesperson from the prime minister, obviously with the interest of making this look like a productive meeting. Israel supports whatever path Trump chooses. Interesting headline. As we also heard from that individual that the U.S. and Israel are fully aligned on Iran. Is the latter headline true? And if that's the case, why would Israel have to follow the U.S. on whatever the president chooses?
Right, Joe, you are spelling out the contradiction here. We are not fully aligned with Israel when it comes to objectives. Right now, President Trump, the United States, wants to open the Strait of Hormuz. That's our primary objective. For Israel, that's not the primary objective. Israel wants to weaken the Iranian regime permanently, and they want to also make sure that Iran no longer has the ability to recreate, to rebuild their nuclear weapons program. The first one is what President Trump is focused on, and he can negotiate probably some kind of deal. The second two are harder to achieve. And so Israel wants to keep the military pressure on while we want to take the military pressure off, as I just explained, because we don't think it was causing us to be able to achieve that objective. So they are in contradiction. But what I will say is, of course, and I think you hinted at this, Prime Minister Netanyahu needed to come out of this meeting, at least showing to the Israeli people that he still had the backing of President Trump and the United States.